All right, here is my pick of the day, and obviously these lines are subject to change. Injury reports come out this late in the year. Funky things happen. Players don't play, and both these teams are on back-to-backs, so it's a very real possibility that um, you might have some missing players. So it's Golden State at Dallas. Both teams are playing really well right now. Dallas has really exceeded my expectations quite a bit. And I expect both teams to play really well in this game. I would even, give the slight nod to Dallas. And, if this was just a money line bet straight, I'd probably go with Dallas. The line is 5. Dallas is getting 5 points. I think that's way too heavy of a line, especially with the way Golden State has been playing lately. Really, their worst game was probably against San Antonio, where they let them come back, and they had a great road trip. They've been having a great road trip. They're in Houston last night, um, blew them out, and Houston's was kind of a team that's been storming up until recently, going in the right direction. Klay Thompson has seemed to have found his shot and has gotten going. Draymond Green has been a much better player down the stretch than he has been most of the season. And certainly you got to contend with Luka, who's MVP worthy. He's my number 2 behind Jokic right now. I think he's past SGA at this point. But I think Golden State, they got a lot to play for here. They want to get out of that 10-9 matchup. It's a long shot, but I know they want to get out of that if they can. And just have that playing scenario just be one game. Dallas, I think, is pretty much cemented to be out of the play-in right now. It's just a matter of who they're going to get, and a lot of that they don't have any control over because the 1 through 3 seeds are so much in flux right now. So I'm taking Golden State. If I was making the pick, obviously you do what you have conviction in. But if I'm making the pick today, I think 5 points is just way too high of a number for two teams that are playing pretty well right now, really well right now. So Golden State getting 5 at Dallas, both on a back-to-back.
You're listening to
They're going to call it a hard foul. They're going to call it a hard foul.
offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hard Foul, where the Celtics have 6 games left remaining in the regular season, and they just wrapped up clinching the home seed throughout with a 135-100 anticlimactic victory over Oklahoma City. Disappointing in the fact that the 2 best players on the Thunder did not play, so kind of what's left in the regular season, highly anticipated game really was just another one of those, let's just get through the end of the regular season games. And, Mike, I think we're at a point where we can certainly recap the Celtics road trip where they went 4-2, on their longest road trip of the season. And but I think we're at a point in the season where we should be looking ahead, unless you disagree. And we have some interesting playoff races down the last stretch of the season, this last 6, 7 games, 5 games, whatever's left for teams. And that will dictate whom the Celtics will meet in the first round. And it could be end up being a high quality opponent. So as where the season stands right now, as I just said, the Celtics have wrapped up the home court. And Mike, the floor is yours. You can take it wherever you want to go. If you want to start with the Celtics' recent performances, or you want to get into what's to come, I'll let you take the lead.
Yeah, I want to touch on that Atlanta game, the second one. We talked about the first one at length. And in particular, I thought Atlanta attacked something that we may see happen versus the Celtics in the playoffs against teams with quicker guards, which is something traditionally the Celtics struggle a little bit against, and some cases this year quite a bit. I thought that Atlanta did a good job of switching out guards to Porzingis out on Murray in overtime and really attacking that matchup. I wonder if Joe wasn't adjusting because he wanted to practice I think that's been kind of a theme here down the stretch, is practicing different things, which in the moment can be frustrating, but also it makes sense. But
It's probably a good thing.
uh, it definitely hurt. The Celtics weren't able to make any stops, and then I don't think this was I'm not making any adjustments for practice. I think this was a mistake by Missoula on that last possession. It was a little worrisome that there was no double team towards Murray with 6 seconds left in the game to get the ball out of his hands. The guy had scored already 8 points in that overtime. He had already put up 44 shots for the game, which is like, I can't believe he shot the ball that many times. And then once again, the execution or non-execution by the Celtics at the end of that fourth quarter in a 1 or 2 point game, whatever it was, or a tie game at that point. I don't remember at this point. Just not great looks at all. Dribbling out the shot clock, taking a bad shot. So it's some things we're not going to really be able to see again into the playoffs, but I guess those are my only concerns that I have for the Celtics. And I thought that those 2 Atlanta games kind of showed us some stuff that they have to work on, and they definitely adjusted their defense against the Pelicans, which I know you want to touch on, Jim. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts just as we move towards the playoffs. Celtics end of the game execution on both ends of the floor are going to be something I'll be certainly looking at right off the bat with the first series with whoever they play.
Yeah, so let's touch on right off that the end of the game executions. I think so. When you watch these games right now, you're kind of watching for what can you take away that that they're either trying and experimenting with that they may use in the playoffs. I know in this last game of the Thunder, it certainly seemed like they were playing with the playoff rotation, and they threw out it looked like a funky 2-1-2 zone that I hadn't really seen before. Them operate. So those are interesting things from the Thunder game. But from this game, it's kind of the concerning things when you go back to the Atlanta game, and you had that situation again down the stretch where Jaylen Brown had the ball. I believe the game was tied. I don't remember if it was regulation or not, but he was just dribbling out the shot clock, and it was clear that Atlanta had taken things away from him, options away, and Missoula just kind of watched and let the play unravel instead of calling a timeout with, whatever, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 seconds on the clock and drawing up a side of out of bounds play. And it's continuing to be a theme. You saw it, in another instance, and I'm getting the games mixed up, the 2 Atlanta games, but you had the Atlanta foul in a tie ball game when the Celtics had the ball with, they looked like they were going to be able to wind the clock down. And at best, Atlanta would have the ball with 2-3 seconds left. With the game still tied or the Celtics leading. But Wes Matthews committed a really stupid foul with 6 seconds left that allowed the Celtics to guarantee the last shot. And instead of calling his last timeout, he just they went out there and ran something that was completely broken. You knew it was broken from the moment the ball was inbounded. Tatum ended up taking a tough fade away.
Actually, it was a runner. It was like
was it a runner? Okay. It was
one foot off 1 foot.
Yeah, it was a high degree of difficulty shot. And, it doesn't mean if you call a timeout, you're going to draw something up, you're going to get something better. There's no guarantees, but, I just like to see it happen every once in a while. He could have called the timeout right when Wesley Matthews committed the foul. He could have called the timeout when the ball was inbounded and said, oh, this isn't going anywhere. I better draw something up. And that's just the thing you see happen over and over again, where he's ending games, close games, with timeouts still in his pocket. And you can point to situations where he should have used them. And it doesn't mean you always should use them. You go back to that Brooklyn game and I know Ime was the coach, and over, at the end of regulation in game 1, where a lot of people are screaming for the timeout, but the Celtics had the Nets in transition and ended up getting a layup to win the game. So sometimes not calling the timeout is the right play. But there are times, and that's my takeaway from those games. And the other takeaway, Mike, and this has just been a prolonged thing with the Celtics, but there is at least a conversation out there that the Celtics, the style they play isn't conducive for the playoffs, that three-pointers will come and go, and, shooting a million threes can actually hurt you in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. The game slowed down. My problem with the Celtics isn't as much that. I don't even know if we're at liberty to have that argument yet, because they changed the way they play so much in the fourth quarter and at the end of games that it's not the 3-point shot that's the problem. The 3-point shot becomes a problem is because they run the clock down so much, and that 3-point shot they end up taking is the only one that was available. Whereas early in the game, in almost every Celtics game, they are putting the defense in rotation over and over again till they get the absolute shot they want, because they move so quick and with such good pace and with such good ball movement. And oftentimes they get the ball to their superstar in a spot where they could just attack the defender without a lot of help. They just weaken the knees of the defense. And, it's almost like they don't trust their system. They don't trust a system that's going to give them a lot of open threes. I'm at a point now where I'd rather just see them, if they're going to lose, I'd rather see them lose with the way they trust in their system and the trust in the style they play in the fourth quarter, even if that's missing a lot of, really good looks from three. At least it shows some conviction. It's like a lack of conviction in what they do when they get in these tight moments or they get up a little bit in the fourth. And you did see that in Atlanta, although, you could really make an argument, and you'd be right, that their sets were good for the most part down the stretch in those games, and they got good looks. But that was like the last 2 minutes. The overall play and pace, as you brought up over and over again in the fourth quarter, changed so drastically. So I'm at a point now, Mike, where when people say the 3-point shot's a problem, I'm kind of rolling my eyes. Because I'm not sure we know if it is or not, because they don't continue to play the same style. If they continue to play that same style and got all those looks that were wide open, what type of pressure does that put on the defense, and how does that change the game? And, we've seen it, they milked down the lead in game 7 and against Miami, where Jimmy Butler had a chance to win it because they decided to play this way. They did it over and over again in Golden State in that finals, and that was with Udoka. And then they did it last year consistently in the playoffs, and we've seen it at times where it's ugly head this season. And I guess if I'm looking forward now, that's my biggest concern for this team is. And right now, it's tough to have a lot of faith that they're going to change that they're going to go into another gear and play that right way. So that's my takeaway from the Atlanta game. The Pelicans game, if you want to touch on that, if you want to follow up on what I said.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. One quick note about the Atlanta game, to Missoula's credit, in that overtime, he did use the timeout and he drew up a nice play. It wasn't just a Tatum, do it all on your own. It was an actual play where Jaylen Brown got a jumper to tie the game.
Great pass from
Celtics.
Yeah.
Yeah, Celtics might have just left too much time on the clock for Murray. And again, I was frustrated that they didn't double Murray there. That didn't make sense to me. But also, maybe the Celtics were like, fuck it, we need to get out of Atlanta. We've been here for like 11 days. So who knows, right? But
yeah,
it is frustrating to me in these fourth quarters, the lack of use of Porzingis. And that's something that needs to change. His matchups are typically great, especially when the ball's moving. And the Celtics, if they play with pace, they probably have more matchups for him.
Yeah, they don't have to change much, right? If they continue to play the same way they do. Yeah.
But something, and again, more recently, he's been playing much better. But there was a stretch of play where he was allowing people to push him off the block. He was hanging out around the 3-point line, kind of hiding in the corners against Atlanta, which I felt was strange. I didn't know if he was tired. I couldn't really understand what he was doing over there because he doesn't take corner threes. So it really offered the Celtics nothing and even shrunk the floor. But that's, to me, the guy to go to a lot of these times when they're having funky stretches, whether they're out of rhythm and they're not playing with pace. You get him the ball down on the post, it opens up a lot of possibilities for you. And you brought up that people talk about the Celtics shooting too many threes. I don't have issues with the Celtics taking threes when it's in rhythm. So when the ball's moving and you're taking a three that's in rhythm, it's much different than what we see in the fourth quarter, or even in that first quarter against the Hornets, where they shot 23s in one quarter, which I did think was way too many.
Yeah, they didn't really care to be there.
They didn't really care, but that's when it's bad. And I also think, depending on your opponent, you have to be smart with the 3-point shot. Because, like, somebody like the Pelicans, in that second half, we want to talk about the Pelicans game, the Celtics just started to kill them inside. And I was texting you back and forth saying, you can't launch threes against this team because all they want to do is run. They don't want to play in the half court. The Pelicans don't shoot threes. They don't make a lot of threes. They want to kill you getting up and down the court. And then that first quarter, when the Celtics found themselves in that deficit, I felt like they were settling for a lot of threes, long rebounds for the Pelicans. They were getting out and running. And what my thing with the Celtics is they can play any way they want because of the guys they have. So if they're in a series like a team versus the Pelicans, they can go into that series and say, you know what? Our priority is going to be to beat this team up inside because we have Porzingis, we have Tatum. Let's go down to the post. That's how we're going to kill them. They're not going to get out and run. You play Milwaukee, we're going to shoot more threes in Milwaukee. That's our philosophy. We're going to make more threes. They don't get out and defend them well. We're going to kill them there. Like, I feel like the Celtics can make those adjustments and other NBA teams can't. And what I'm interested to see is if they're going to allow that to be their philosophy in the playoffs, not to just play one way, but to play multiple different ways to kill teams however they want. And if they're focused and they're doing that for 4 quarters, they're going to be a real hard beat. But to your point, I have no idea what to expect from this team in the fourth quarter or close games at all. I think that's our big concern. I know that you're probably happy with the defense in the second half versus the Pelicans. I'll let you talk about that. I know that I was.
I thought that was a story.
Great.
I thought that was a story.
Yeah, I think probably the best defense they played since the trade deadline.
I thought it was the best they played all season. I thought it was the best defense they played all season. And it started, they had an okay second quarter where they were able to get out and transition, but it wasn't great. I mean, they outplayed the Pelicans. It wasn't like one of those show-stopping, but Tony
that
Brothers,
end of the second quarter when White hit that three.
Yeah,
that run was awesome.
Yeah, and
they were pissed off at Crawford. They were all playing pissed off defensively those last 2 minutes of the third quarter, and that's when the intensity changed. You could just tell they were locked in. The shot blocking by Porzingis too. Woo.
Yeah, Tony Brothers, pissed off.
Tony Brothers, yeah.
Yeah, pissed off Jason Tatum, and Tatum went on a little run. And he was involved in every play, and the next thing you know, the Celtics, who had been trailing all half, White hits that buzzer three, they go up 2. And then, that was great. But we've seen that kind of happen and then come out in the third flat often. What was really something to me, and you look at a course of, I thought it was 18 to 20 minutes, where they played the best defensive basketball of the season. And it started with Jaylen Brown, who, by the way, has been their best player since the All-Star break, hands down. It's not really close. And I know he's been a lightning rod, in the postseason and things like that. But he has been an incredible offensive player, and he took the responsibility of guarding Zion Williamson, who, if we remember, killed the Celtics in the first game back in Boston. The Celtics just could not stop his penetration.
The first half, too, of this game.
Yeah, in the first quarter. Not that,
Yeah, yeah.
he slowed down tremendously after that. And
Mhm.
Brown just really, he got in his airspace. He wasn't giving him any room to shoot. He was going to make him work. He was going to wear him down. And Brown took an absolute beating that game. He slipped on the floor. He slipped and hurt his hand. He took a shot to the face. And he just kept
That's right.
trucking. He just kept
Yeah.
working, and I mean, I don't think people understand that assignment of a guy that big, that strong, that athletic, that can handle the ball, and you're called on to basically cover him the entire game. And Brown did a tremendous job. And what that eight was able to do is, kind of unleash Porzingis underneath, and he was just cleaning up blocks. He was just being able to be a rim protector with eliminating Zion, and the rest of the Celtics just went on a string defensively. And it felt like at times there were five, like there were seven Celtics on the court. The Pelicans just could not figure out how to get a shot. And you're absolutely right. They did a better job of not turning the ball over, giving the Pelicans running opportunities. But even when they did, the Celtics got back and took that away. There was a huge commitment. They did a much better job in the defensive glass, and that has a lot to do with the Pelicans don't crash the offensive glass at all. But I don't remember the Celtics giving up an offensive rebound in that second half. I'm sure they do, but none of them did. But it doesn't stand out to me as any type of big play. And it got to the point where I thought it was completely in the Pelicans' head, where they passed up open shots, or froze when they got the ball open, almost waiting for a Celtic to be there. Like, oh my God, there is no Derek White, a Holiday in my face. Tatum isn't coming. And to the credit of the bench guys, when Hauser and Pritchett and folks came in, Cornette, they continued to bring that defensive intensity. And I thought I was impressed by that, and I know in the pregame they talked about the Celtics going to come out and this was going to mean something to them. I wasn't sure, like it's March, things are wrapped up for this team. I know they came off tough losses to Atlanta, but they're probably saying to themselves, so what? Like, okay, that happened. It wasn't our best shot. And then they were probably moved off it. But something triggered that where they showed what they could be defensively. And I know different teams will give you different looks. And I know there was no Brandon Ingram out there who can create his own shot and to beat great defenses. And the Pelicans don't have a lot of that without him.
No, they don't.
But the Pelicans, even without him, have been playing at a high level, have been winning a lot. And by the way, that's kind of set them, kind of in a cycle in a bad way. That's since that Celtics game. They got crushed to Orlando the other day. The offense looked a mess. I know Zion went down too, so that doesn't help. But they are that to me was something that they should hang their hat on and know they can do. And when we get into these big moments, and these big games, you'd love to see that intensity. We know Drew Holiday and Derek White can navigate screens. So let's not switch it in big moments in the playoffs. Let's, if you have a Dejounte Murray kind of going off like you talked about, maybe it's not a double Mike. Maybe it's just a drop from Porzingis and Holiday fights over and he just becomes a menace. You talk about different ways they can play an offense. They can play different ways in defense. That's what Holiday's done his entire career. He's doing things differently here now, but you can switch that up. So I was just encouraged by that. It wasn't something that their offense has been such the prominent force this season that there's been instances of good defense. They can play good defense. They have really good individual defensive players. But that was one of the few times this year when it was on a string and you felt the impact everywhere. You just felt that defensive impact everywhere. And by the way, they didn't play great offensively in that second half. They missed a shit ton of shots, shit ton of wide open shots, layups, Jaylen Brown's offensive numbers weren't great. He missed layups, but I think that was as good a performance as he's had all season. So that's my takeaway from the Pelicans game. And so those are the, I think what we're saying is when we're watching these right now and these last six, I don't know what you're going to be able to pull. People are going to point to that Milwaukee game. I wonder if the Celtics are going to play anyone for that game. Does it even matter? Like, why show Milwaukee anything at this point?
I think that they have to kind of play guys because they're going to be scared to lose in rhythm with the play-in tournament. So I think you're going to see guys down the stretch.
Maybe the last couple of games.
Because you'll probably have guys nights off here and there.
Yeah.
So I don't expect everybody to sit against Milwaukee. Maybe Jaylen Brown's going to sit at some point to rest his hand. Obviously, Tatum's going to get nights off here and there, Porzingis, but I still expect to see your typical regular season guys running out. It's not like old postseasons anymore where you just play. They're going to have a lot of time off.
No, they are. And let's get right into it, Mike. This thing's winding down. You look at the standings.
Yeah, I just have to. I'm walking into my office, Jim. I got to turn the alarm off, so I'm just going to log off for a second and let you take over.
So we look at these standings right now as Mike has logged off, so he doesn't get in trouble at work. You have the play-in tournament in the East become very interesting. Joel Embiid is back. He looks better than I thought he would. He looks, I thought in that first game against the Thunder, he was okay, but then he got better in the fourth quarter. And for a guy coming off knee injury, you don't expect that. Against Miami, he was okay. Again, it wasn't great Embiid. It wasn't vintage Embiid, but he was effective. And I thought it freed up Maxey to just go off. I don't know if Maxey has that game without Embiid being in there. And that's where that team becomes such a problem. Embiid doesn't have to be at his best anymore because you got Maxey. And Maxey with Embiid is just a different player. And, a big game against the Heat, even with Embiid wearing down in the fourth quarter, they were able to pull that off. And so now, Mike, you have the Pacers, who are a quality team, in that sixth spot. The Heat a half game behind them. The Sixers a full game behind the Pacers to get out, and that's your 6, 7, 8. So I guess I ask you is, how do you think this is going to shake out? 1, and 2, how do you want it to shake out? So two different questions.
I think it's going to shake out how I want it.
There you go.
He's got an easy schedule here down the stretch and a lot to play for, and the most talented team. I think Philly's going to end up in the 6th seed. How I want it is to not have Philadelphia in the 8th seed and anybody else bring it on. One thing I will say about Philadelphia, last night was a great game. They rested Embiid for a lot of that fourth quarter and then had him play the last 3.5 minutes. He wasn't himself in that last 3.5 minutes. Shot an air ball from 3. He was refusing to post up. He wasn't setting screens. Defensively, he wasn't moving much. So one thing I'd be concerned about if I'm Philadelphia is if it's going to be the same old Embiid because of this injury, that in the fourth quarters, he's not going to have any more energy left because he certainly did not last night.
Well,
but he is a guy who got his legs back.
Yeah, flip the switch from the Thunder game because I thought he was very effective in the fourth quarter down the stretch against the Thunder. I actually thought he was great. He had that steal and layup and like brought home that win where they had to come back. And then he looked exhausted, like you said. So I don't know if it's part of this is just getting in shape for him. But what I was saying when you were off, because he was there, Maxey was just so much better too.
Yeah,
just his presence.
They're going to be a tough out.
Yeah, I think they beat Cleveland if they're the 6th seed.
I think the Celtics. If the Celtics can end up getting a team like Miami or Atlanta or Chicago in that first round, it's going to make a world of difference. I know Miami typically will show up and who knows, right? They can pull off an upset or make it 7 games. But the Celtics are just so much more talented than all these teams that even when you look at the second round, Celtics, if they can avoid Philadelphia in the first round, then your second round's not that tough either. New York's dealing with a ton of injuries. Julius Randle's not going to return. You end up playing them.
Yeah.
You're 4-0 against them this year. I feel like you have such an advantage against them. End up playing Orlando. Yeah, they're tough. But again, you're just so much better.
Yeah.
It's a series where I don't think it goes deep. The Celtics are locked in. That your first 2 rounds, it's not going to wear you out like it has in the past, where they had a 7-game series in the second round against Philadelphia last year. So if there's a way they can avoid Philadelphia, I hope so. If not, Jim, wow. We'll have a lot to talk about right away.
It's going to be I'll tell people right now, it's going to be a long series. If they get Philadelphia, it's going to be a long series and Philadelphia has a puncher's chance. I think the Celtics should and will win, but Philadelphia has a chance. Who would you rather, before I get into them, who would you rather see? Obviously, you'd rather see Chicago or Atlanta, but they're kind of the longer shot. But
although I hate any playoff game in Atlanta because I just feel like the Celtics are hungover. But yeah.
Well, but who would you rather see, Miami or Indiana?
Miami, and this is why. Yeah. I feel like in order to win a championship, the Celtics have to beat them. Like there's this thing that's hanging over their head. I think though, outside of that, I'd rather see Indiana if I'm the Celtics. I think it's an easier series than Miami. Yeah. Miami is a veteran team. They know how to win. They know how to win in Boston. Indiana is a young team that doesn't have experience in the playoffs. And I think at home you can really kick their ass and blow them out. Against Miami, it's like all bets are off. They'll go into their junk defenses. They did it last night against Philadelphia. They almost won the game with zone defense. Even Philadelphia struggled against the zone. You feel like Jimmy Butler's just a different player once the playoffs start. Like he's completely different. And Caleb Martin's a different player. Man, I just, I think if you had your choice basketball-wise, like who's the easier opponent, I do think it's Indiana. But I do think the basketball gods are lining it up. Like, you know what, Boston, you want to win the championship, you got to beat this team.
Yeah, so I think it's Indiana too. Tyrese Halliburton's confidence should scare anybody because that kid feels like he can go in and do anything, anywhere against anybody, and that guys like that are always scary. But they're just a different team since the Siakam trade. I mean, look at the loss to Brooklyn the other night. Siakam had scored 12 straight points. Had taken over the fourth quarter. And so they go to him in isolation, the last 3 possessions. Charge, front rim jumper, turnover. And I just feel like they gotten away from
who they are.
Yeah, their offensive style that was really successful. Now, I get it. That offensive style isn't conducive for the playoffs. And I think that's where the Thunder is going to have problems. But it was who you are, and now you're kind of taking the ball out of Halliburton's hands and putting him in Siakam and putting him in those ISOs. And I don't think Siakam's a big time player, and I think that would be the better matchup.
Remember what Jaylen Brown did to him in the bubble?
I know, and that's where the Miami stuff is scary because not only do they have guys that are. You mentioned Bam, you mentioned Butler, but they seem to always have guys that step up that should just definitely not step up. And that always makes you worried. The Celtics aren't, whomever they play, unless it's the Hawks or the Bulls, they're not just going to get a team that is a complete lightweight, typical 8 seed. They're going to get a pretty good team to potentially a title contender. If it is Philadelphia, like look, if the Philadelphia gets a 6 seed and gets Cleveland, I think they win. Favorite. Yeah, and I think they win in 5 or 6. I really do. I think that's the talent gap with Embiid.
Cleveland's a tough place to win, though, so I think it's 7.
Yeah, I don't think Cleveland is going to be a good playoff team, but and they showed that last season. It's a tough place to play, and maybe Embiid isn't.
And with the way they call games now, too, if they don't allow Embiid to just flop and get to the line,
well,
Cleveland plays a physical style of D with a lot of bigs.
against the Thunder, they didn't seem to call it much different for Embiid than they have been. He was just flailing and falling, and they would get him every call. So I don't know.
Ugh.
And then, you line up Milwaukee and Philly, which would be a great playoff series. And, it's just interesting how the East is going to shake out, because we assume it's Orlando and New York, but it very well could be New York,
Miami.
Cleveland, or Orlando, Cleveland. New York could bump up to 3. New York could fall.
It's a nice win by the Knicks last night.
Yeah, it was a nice win by them. Randall's out now. Orlando could go in the same direction. Cleveland looks to be heading in the wrong direction at the wrong time right now. So they could drop down. I mean, they had a chance to get within a half game of Milwaukee for that 2 seed and just laid an egg against Phoenix. And,
Milwaukee lost by
Milwaukee
20 at home to Memphis.
Yeah, they looks to be just playing out the string. March is just the only thing I wanted to bring up and kind of end with, and you can close what you want. We try to read so much into March, and teams that are in playoff races, you can, but a team like Milwaukee and Boston, I don't know what you can read. So here's the last 4 champions in March. The Nuggets were 9-10. The Warriors were 10-11. The Raptors were 9-8, and the Warriors were 7-8. So I think you get to a point where these veteran teams, and I know the Celtics record is going to be better than that, but their play hasn't been great at times. And I think you just get to a point with these veteran teams that we're at this point of the season. They're trying new things. They're getting ready for the playoffs. They're experimenting with rotations. They're putting guys in spots where they might be uncomfortable. Maybe they're throwing out zones like you mentioned and doing other things. And I think we need to be careful as fans and observers as saying, well, Milwaukee lost to Memphis. Well, Dame didn't play. Maybe they were trying different matchups. Jackson was going off. They didn't double him until late in the game. Maybe there really isn't that much to see there, I guess, for teams like that.
That's a good point. I think that going down the stretch here, there's going to be a lot of good basketball, too, on the other end of that for teams contending. I mean, out west, a lot of things are wide open, whether it be the 1 seed. We have 3 teams within a half game of each other. Then you have the Clippers, who are completely falling apart, which is just watching them is pretty funny to see Paul George get questions about James Harden, and his answer isn't that, Harden's working through something. It's, well, you got to ask the coach about that. I'm starting to think that this offseason, Paul George is not going to be a Clipper. And then, of course, you have what's going to happen in that
They did
play-in.
beat Denver, though, Mike, last night. They did.
Yeah, but Denver didn't have Jamal Murray out there, and that shot at the buzzer by Jokic looked like a guy practicing something. You see the shot he took? I was like, that guy can get whatever shot he wants, and he took a running 3 with one hand. It's a good point. They did beat Denver last night. And so the Clippers, I mean, they got the talent there. They played the right way this season at points where they looked like a championship contender. So that Western Conference is pretty solidified now. Looks like that 6th seed is definitely going to fall. I mean, Dallas is playing really well right now.
They are.
You look at a team like Phoenix is going to be probably in the play-in. Wow, right?
Well, I think it's going to be the Pelicans now, especially with the injuries they have.
Yeah, so it could end up being the Pelicans.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot of good March basketball. We got 2 Final Fours that have been great. Watching NC State do what they're doing. If you're a fan of women's college basketball, this is like you had your Larry Bird and Magic Johnson moment last weekend. So March is a great time for hoop, and where after the Final Four is over, Jim, it's playoffs are here. This is going to go quick. We're going to be in the play-in tournament, which is great basketball. I love the play-in tournaments. And then Celtics first-round matchup. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know how much there is to talk about much on this pod until then. It's about matchups, and maybe we can talk about the offseason a little bit about who gets extended on the next pod, which should be an interesting conversation right before we hit the playoffs. So once the playoffs hit, it's just about that matchup. So that's it.
I will say this about the NCAA, especially the men's side. I don't think it's been great basketball. I think
Oh,
it's.
I love that. I love that fat kid from NC State. I could watch him play basketball
I
all
think
day.
there's been at times where there's been good games. I think the officiating has been brutal. Where the teams are on the bonus with like 7-8 minutes to go, and it just becomes a free throw contest.
Well, let's just say it then. The truth is about college basketball is that the women's game is a better product. More people are watching it.
Well, there's
They've
more
adjusted
stars.
to what you see in the NBA. It's spread out. You have games that end in the hundreds. College basketball is still slow. It's too slow. The refs have way too much power. The women's game caters to their stars. They also they highlight their stars more. They have faces of the game. So college men's basketball has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's been just great. Okay, and I think the star attraction in the women's game is something that caught people's attention. But I'm a pro basketball person, and the game is just so much better, and for obvious reasons. Both at the WNBA and NBA level, like Caitlin Clark and the LSU star there that I'm forgetting her name. That's great. It's fun to watch. The supporting cast is slow and okay, and there's it takes forever to get a layup off. It's not the level of the WNBA skill set, and it's fine. It's good to watch. It's good basketball, but the idea that you see some of this stuff on Twitter for both the men's and the women's game is that this is why college basketball is better. It's not. It's just not like it, unless you don't want to see skill. And
The sad thing about it, though, is like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, they make more money playing in college basketball
Yeah,
than the
that is
WNBA.
yeah.
So, like, I look at them still having a year of eligibility next year. If I was advising them, I'd say to stay, make more money.
Although I think Caitlin Clark at this point is so marketable, she's going to be able to make money no matter what she does.
Yeah. She'll be in the 3-point contest at the NBA All-Star Weekend next year.
Yeah.
Unless the WNBA just wants to completely shit its pants on highlighting its face of the league. She should have been in the 3-point contest this year. One thing I do want to say is I agree with you all the way, Jim. I'm not a fan of college basketball. I don't typically watch it, but I could watch that Zach Randolph kid from NC State play basketball all day. I am like rooting for that kid. I want him to win it so bad because he'll never have a career in the NBA. This is it. This is his pinnacle right now.
Yeah.
He's the Sean May from North Carolina. Like he's that Michael Sweetney from Georgetown. I just want a big country Brian Reeves. I want to see this kid do it. I want to see him do it. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, I can't help but root for Dan Hurley and UConn. The book by Woj. Why am I forgetting the name of it? Basketball Dreams, I think, or maybe that's no. But it chronicles the St. Anthony High School, and his father is one of the best basketball coaches I've ever read, and just shows the great work they do down there. So I never really wanted to be a Hurley fan. I was never a big Bobby Hurley guy, and but that book has kind of flipped me, and I root for them now. All right, but that's all I got, Mike. Let's play out the string here with the Celtics, and the playoffs can't get here soon enough.
All right, see ya.